Hello and welcome to Padre's Corner. I'm Father Robert Ballas here, the digital Jesuit. Padre's Corner is a show where we stick you into the mind of a Jesuit priest and see if you come out sane on the other side. Now, Padre's Corner was developed a couple of months ago when we thought we wanted to do something for the chat room. You know, the good men and women, the boys and the girls, the geeks and the gals who make up the Twit Army. So we're going to talk about anything that we want to. It's not necessarily a tech show where we talk about technology, but it's a show where we talk about the stuff that geeks like. So let's get right to it. Now, I want to talk a little bit about a low-cost mosquito repeller. We covered this a while back on Know-How, and we started talking about something that an engineer had come up with to reduce the number of deaths that he saw each and every single year from mosquitoes. Now, if you've seen this on YouTube, you know that Mr. Agarwal came up with this non-pesticide, non-chemical way to get rid of mosquitoes. Now, the reason why he did this is because mosquitoes are a big killer around the world. Over 1 million people die each year because of mosquito-borne diseases. The big killers are malaria, dengue fever, and others. And unfortunately, we've never developed a practical solution to preventing mosquito bites or to inoculate a large enough part of the population to get rid of the disease. Now, most of the successful solutions have not focused on killing the mosquitoes or preventing the spread of disease, but instead going after the breeding grounds of mosquitoes. We know that mosquitoes breed in still, stagnant water. So those efforts have focused on either eliminating that still, stagnant water or covering the surface in some sort of lighter-than-water film or, unfortunately, pesticide that would keep the larvae from forming. Unfortunately, that has a lot of bad side effects. When you cover the surface of a water with oil or when you eliminate all little puddles, you're really toying with the ecosystem. You're introducing a lot of chemicals that you probably don't want to introduce into the food chain. So this engineer came up with a slightly different idea. Rather than covering the surface of the water in some sort of pesticide, rather than eliminating the water, why not just make it so that the mosquitoes don't lay their eggs? Now, it sounds simple, and actually it is. What he came up with was a device that, when switched on, would generate ripples in the water. A very simple device. This thing, I believe, cost about $11 for him to create. It had a solar panel on the top. It had a small air pump. It had a custom-made circuit board. It had a battery so that you could continue operating it in the night, and also a switch so that if someone tried to tamper with it, it would let out a little electric screech. Now, the cool thing about this is those ripples, just those little swirls in the water, are enough to keep mosquitoes from breeding in it. In fact, the way he figured this out is he looked at where mosquitoes had actually started to breed, and what he found was it was always in the areas that were not exposed to the wind. Just that tiny little ripple is enough to keep the mosquitoes away. Now, I'm actually really excited by this because this kind of engineering is the stuff that well, it changes the world. Imagine a device that anyone could build for, let's say, in volume under $5 a piece, dropping this into any body of water, any well, any local swimming hole, and suddenly being free from the scourge of mosquitoes. That's something to figure. Now, the next story, it comes out of an unpleasant experience I had over the last couple of days. Actually, no. Let me take that back. It's not that it was unpleasant. It's that it was a little frustrating. Over the last couple of days, I've been talking to a bunch of people who are really, really into renewable energy. Now, that's good. I like people who are into renewable energy. I like talking about renewable energy, everything from hydro to solar to wind power. It's important that we consider it. But this graphic came out over the weekend, and it's generated a little bit of stir. This shows you the region of the Earth, marked off by these little boxes, that we would need to be able to power the entire planet. This large box right here, they claim that if you could cover that area in solar panels of the current efficiency that we have, then we could do away with all the other energy. And it's been a rallying cry. And I understand that they're not trying to say, oh, let's cover the Algerian desert in solar panels. But they're using this to say how easy it would be. And honestly, it's not. I'm all for renewable energy, but if you were to locate all of your solar panels where it makes the most sense, where you have a lot of sun, very little moisture, very few things to actually destroy the installation, well, then how do you get the energy around the world? And if you distribute the panels around the world, then how do you make sure that they maintain high efficiency? And we're talking about not just a little red box. We're talking about building more panels by a large margin than have ever existed in the history of mankind combined. And then there's the energy to produce the panels. There's the toxins that are created by the panels, which, by the way, making solar panels is one of the most toxic processes we do on this planet today. It's not an easy thing to do. Now, beyond that, there's this mentality that I really want to push back against, where it's just because of big government. It's just because of big corporations. It's because there's a conspiracy to take away the green energy from us that we're still using fossil fuels. Not really. I mean, yes, there is a lot of corporate reluctance, and you know that I've talked out about renewable energies, but that's not really the case. What we're talking about here is practicality. What we're talking about is energy density. What we're talking about is the fact that even though renewable energies are fantastic, they just don't have the power density that we want. Now, what do I mean by that? Let me explain a tiny bit by talking about China and coal. Now, coal is a dirty word, and rightfully so. When we talk about coal, we talk about one of the most polluting substances on the face of the planet. Coal is that thing that we were taught is evil, but unfortunately, 40% of the world's power is still generated by coal. This is especially prominent in Asia, which has seen the biggest growth in energy demand over the past 20 years. I mean, you can't grow a population, you can't become industrialized without energy. And when you are first developing, the energy you're going to go for is the cheapest energy, the one that's most abundant. And the one that is most abundant is coal and other fossil fuels. Well, what we've seen is that, yes, 40% of the world's power comes from fossil fuels, comes from coal. And although our focus has been on removing automobiles from the road, most of the offenders for the gases that cause global warming, most of the offenders for the gases that are really bad pollutants in the atmosphere come not from automobiles, not from nuclear power plants, not from gas-fired power plants, but from coal-fired power plants. China is infamous for their smog. They emit 1/4. Let me repeat that. They emit 1/4. China alone emits more, burns more coal than the rest of the world combined. Now, those power plants put out tons of the particulates that make smog so deadly. China is also investing a lot in hydropower, in renewable power. We've seen that. In fact, right now, they are the #1 leaders in the investment in renewable energy. They've installed, deployed more solar panels than any other country, including the United States. In fact, China spent $54 billion on renewable energy in 2013. That places it far above the United States, which had a 2013 investment of $36.7 billion. China installed 26 gigawatts of electrical capacity from renewable energy sources in 2014 alone. That includes 14 gigawatt hours from farms and 12 gigawatt hours from solar. Now, 26 gigawatt hours sounds like a lot, and that actually is a lot of power. That would displace a few coal-fired / gas-fired plants. But in 2013 alone, China was estimated to have used 37.8 terawatt hours. A terawatt hour is 1,000 gigawatt hours. So in other words, all of that renewable energy is a tiny little drop in the bucket. Even adding in the power from their very significant hydroelectric dam capacity, China generates less than 7% of their power from renewables. Now, renewables just don't have the energy density of coal or even gas or oil. So China is in a conundrum. All of that investment, putting them #1 in the world, is not enough even to keep up with the growing demand. In other words, if they were to just go on a binge and stay #1 in the deployment of renewable energies for the next 10 years, at the end of 10 years, they would be even further back than they are now, with an annual increase of about 2%, 2 to 4% in their energy demand. Building all of those solar farms, all those hydro dams, all those wind power installations just won't give them enough power. And so they turn to coal. I know this is a bad idea, but they've turned to green gas. I don't know if you've heard about green gas, but green gas is the idea, the green coal. The idea of green coal is that you're going to sequester the carbon dioxide and the particulates in a process that extracts that CO2 from the exhaust generated by coal-fired plants and then shoves it underground. This is far from a perfect production line. This is not an ideal situation, but folks, it's pretty much all they got. So this is what I want you to consider. You heard me talk a lot about nuclear power on Padre's Corner. And it's not because I like nuclear power. I mean, I would prefer to have a world without nuclear power because, yeah, you can have some serious consequences. The technology is getting better all the time, but all you need is one accident with nuclear power to have a really, really bad day. We saw that at 3 Mile Island. We saw that at Chernobyl. We saw that at Fukushima. But here's the thing. Renewable energies, green energies, even though we like them, just don't cut it. If you combine all the green energy around the world, even in the places that are deploying it most rapidly, they don't keep up with growth, much less even come close to replacing the overall bulk of what we need. It's like going into debt and not being able to pay off the interest. People who say, well, we can go wind, we can go solar, we can go tidal, we can go hydroelectric, I applaud that. I like that. I want to spend money on that. But to say that we can do that alone is just not telling the truth. This means that the only technologies we have to fuel our geometrically expanding demand for power. And by the way, the EIA has estimated that our power demands are going to double by 2025, are coal, oil and natural gas, or nuclear. Those are the only technologies currently with the energy density to sate our appetite for power. So, if it's not going to be coal and it can't be renewables, you get to choose between oil and gas or nuclear. Which way are you going to go? Now, when we come back, we've got our special guest, Mr. Scott Johnson from the Frog Pants Network. He's coming on to, well, just chew the cud and tell us how he got his start in his artistic license. But before that, hey, bro, did you know you got an owl in your kitchen? That's not it. This is it.
Mr. Owl, you okay? It's okay. Okay. Oh, it's okay. Please don't give me that look. Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, please don't fly. Oh, my. Hey, good boy. Good, don't give me that look. Oh, God, he's gonna fly. Oh, God, he's gonna fly. You're doing good. Doing good. No, don't fly. Don't fly. Oh, shit. Yes! Yeah!
And there you go, folks. That's what you do if you ever have an owl in your kitchen. Now, we welcome to the show Mr. Scott Johnson of the Frog Pants Network. Scott, it is so good to have you on. Thank you for coming on Padre's Corner.
I'm thrilled to be here, man. We kind of been trying to do this for a couple of months. It's nice to actually get it going. This is great. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, our schedule has always kind of mashed up against each other, but it's nice to finally have you on, sir.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. That owl freaked me out. I got to tell you, this is I've seen that video before, but I can't deal with the way those things look at you. It's rough.
I remember where I grew up in Fremont, California. We had an owl that would always hang on the eaves of our house. We had a little place where I could get into and just sort of hang out and hunt for bugs. But every once in a while, it would come down on the deck, and it would just stare at you with those soulless eyes, and you're just like, oh, all right, it's your deck. I'm out.
Yeah, they're bad. I remember. So one of my favorite movies growing up was Secret of Nim. Right, love that.
Oh
movie.
my gosh,
and it was great. Will Wheaton's first film role, by the way, played one of the little kids. Anyway, that's
really?
Not the point.
Wait, which one?
He played one of the mother's kids. He was the sick one.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, wow. Oh, now I have to watch that to listen for the voice.
Yeah, I forget, but he's in there anyway. So that was interesting. But there's a scene where they got to go talk to this wise owl, right? Who knows all these tricks and questions or whatever.
That's right.
That owl put me on a path of never liking owls. And so that video kind of gave me the willies.
What about Boo Boo from Clash of the Titans, the original Clash of the Titans?
That thing is not enough of a real owl to give me the creeps, because that thing's of course, robot owl, and super annoying at that. So yeah, never bothered by the robot owl, but you give me a real owl with the real instincts and that predatory look in those eyes, going the other way.
Harry Potter didn't do anything for you? I mean,
no, I mean, I like the idea that I always like these ideas. Like in Game of Thrones, it's ravens, and in Harry Potter, it's owls and other things. They use these birds to like deliver mail or to take messages someplace. It's the email of fantasy worlds. And I think that's really cool. But if I was going to do it, I'd have like, I don't know, like an ostrich deliver my mail. I think that'd be pretty rad. Seeing those things just running up and down streets. I'm all in for that.
Now, Scott, of course, the Twit Army knows you. We've seen you. We saw you on Frame Rate. We've seen you on Twit. We've seen you pretty much on most of our shows that the Twit Army hangs out at. And the funny thing is, even though we know you, I don't know if we really, really know you. Can you tell us a little bit about your upbringings? I mean, where did you come from? Have you always lived in Utah?
I have. I was born here, raised here, was born in what you would refer to as South Salt Lake City. It's now a little town called Sandy, which is not sandy at all. It's all very nice and lush and green this time of year. Anyway, I grew up here, lived here my whole life. I love it here. It's my favorite place to be. I love the surroundings. I love the mountains. I love the outdoors. Southern Utah has just the most amazing canyon lands and sort of natural beauty you'll see anywhere in this country. And it's nice to kind of live in proximity of all of that. Where I live now in the Salt Lake Valley, we're just surrounded by mountains on all sides. And it just is the most picturesque thing you can imagine. And I think that's what has kept me here. I just have a real fondness for it. And I have a lot of family here and stuff too. But everyone's nice. Everything's clean. Salt Lake City is a beautiful, clean city. And, very tech savvy in this part of the world over here. We've got, we are the home of, they're not so important these days, but the home of Novell and WordPerfect, that all kind of sprang from here. A lot of video game development happens here. EA's got a big office. Disney Interactive has a big office. So yeah, it's all the kind of stuff I'm sort of into. Also exists in this place, and it's me and my wife and my 3 kids, and we're loving it. It's great. It's a good place to be. Yeah, and I don't know if I've ever explained on a Twitch show more than just, hey, I do these other podcasts or whatever, right?
Well, we're going to talk about that tonight.
I'm sure we're going to get to those, but it's funny because I've never been actually asked, where were you born and where did you grow up? That's a new one. So nice job. Congratulations.
I have to say, I've driven through Utah before on my way over to Kansas because that's where people go. They go to Kansas. But absolutely, without a doubt, the most beautiful scenery we have in the United States. If people have never driven through Utah, it's stunning. I mean, you think that it's just this nothing place near the Rockies, but oh my goodness, especially if you get there at the right time, just as the sun is coming over some of those ridges, it's magical.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like it. And the funny thing is, people either think I live in the desert or I live in a mountain somewhere, and it's neither are true. I live in a place where we get snow in the winter, amazing snow. We had the Winter Olympics here in 2002, and we had a great time with that. So we have all that stuff, and it's all within like 30 minutes driving distance for me. I can go to Park City. I can go to Sundance if I want in the winter, although I usually don't like to because there's too much snow and too much traffic because it's crazy and Hollywood shows up there. But anyway, we have these really great winters. We have amazing springs, hot summers, gets up to, 104 sometimes. And fall is incredible. So if you want like a real Halloween where it's just cold enough to see your breath and you're out at night and it's just like fall leaves everywhere, I'm telling you, man, this is the place to be for that. So we get all the seasons. I mean, I get accused a lot of my shows of constantly singing the praises of my home state, but it is kind of, once you've spent some time here, it's kind of hard not to. You feel a little bit of pride with it. I mean, I certainly have, my carbon footprint is not helping anything, but we have a lot of natural beauty here that, constantly reminded about. I could walk out right now and just look in the face of, there's a lake right over there and a mountain right behind it. And it would just, the pictures alone would blow your mind. So yeah, I love it here. It's great.
There you have it, folks. Real men
Moved
live
to
in
Utah. Yeah.
Right. Scott, I want to talk a little bit past that. You are, of course, an artist. First and foremost, you're an artist. You're actually a brilliant artist.
Geez, thanks. That's very nice of you.
I found this poster in the back of you drew this collection of different characters from different sci-fi films and franchises, everything from the Stargate to Star Wars and Star Trek. You even had a couple of that had some of the people guessing, like Alien Mind. They couldn't figure out Alien Mind. And I'm looking at this and going, oh my God, this poster encompasses my childhood growing up with sci-fi. So where did you get that bent? I mean, that bent that is both creative. So obviously you can draw and obviously you can create, but also incredibly geeky.
Well, when I was growing up, there were a lot of jocks around. I felt like a kind of a nerd and an outcast. And for a very long time, kind of a late bloomer, kind of a small, skinny kid that just kind of, I don't know, I didn't like where everybody else was headed. Didn't really care for playing soccer the rest of my life. I like sports, but I didn't like playing it so much. I was more interested in watching it. And so I felt like I was like when I was growing up that I was a little bit weird because I was really into science fiction. You know, you'd turn on the original Battlestar Galactica on TV and I would just think it was the greatest thing in the history of ever. You know, Star Wars literally changed my life. Star Trek was this huge staple of my entertainment diet. And Saturday morning cartoons had this giant impact on me. And for whatever reason, I felt like I was the only kid for hundreds of miles that felt this way. It's funny because I feel like we're just now getting to the point, especially here in the Valley, where people are accepting their nerdiness and they're kind of letting it hang out a little bit. We had extremely successful Comic-Con last year, our first ever here in Salt Lake City. And it did, I want to say it was the second highest opening Comic-Con of anyone in the country. And any first weekend Comic-Con, we were in second place, and I can't remember who we were right behind, but we beat New York. I can't remember the other one. It was third. But anyway, it was it's kind of a big deal, and everybody kind of nerds out now, and it's like kind of a accepted thing. I feel like this is generally true where, in the 80s, it just, I don't know. I just felt like we were pushed down a little bit for those things, and now it's super cool. Well, that was always part of me, and I got real tall real quick in high school. That meant kids quit picking on me, and I was free to nerd out and geek out on whatever I wanted to, and it just carried through, man. Like, I don't know. Like, I get to basically be an adult kid now and still have all those interests, and I figured out a way to make money at it with both the art and the podcast side and everything else I have going on. So yeah, and hearing that they didn't see Enemy Mine or didn't quite have that jump out at them makes me really happy because that's an obscure, weird science fiction movie, and I used to think that was the coolest thing when I was younger. By the way, it does not hold up at all. It's kind of crap now.
No, it's not crap. It's just
the idea is good. The idea is good.
The idea is good.
Concept is good. The lesson of that is good. That holds up. What does not hold up is the scenery, the effects, the acting, and the actors and the makeup. Everything else about it, the facade of the film.
You didn't like Dennis Quaid?
I love Dennis Quaid. I still like Dennis Quaid, although he's kind of got crazy eyes now.
He's got a little bit.
I'm a little, for whatever reason, he just kind of gives me the willies now. But, give me like, what was that baseball one he did? The Rookie. Give me the Rookie era, which is only like 2003, which seemed like not that long ago, but I guess it was a decade and a year ago. But give me that era. I'll take him there. But when he's in his early career, like Dreamscape and stuff like that, he was kind of crazy, a little bit of a spaz. And then now he's kind of gone back to that. So I'm a big fan of kind of in between Dennis Quaid. I don't even know where Randy Quaid is, but I think he's in Canada still. He's still running from the feds or whatever he's done.
So
but anyway,
I take it you weren't a big fan of Inner Space.
I liked Inner Space a lot. That's not too early. That kind of came. That came at a part of his career where I felt like he was starting to lean into the more interesting roles. I really liked Inner Space. Now I haven't seen it since it was in the theater, so I don't know how that holds up. It's probably crap now. I have no idea.
I got to ask you this because I was thinking about this the other day when I was down in San Jose. Like you, I was kind of one of those misplaced youth, and I really didn't care. I mean, I was a geek. I wasn't a jock. I was more academic. I was on the debate team. I was in the computer club. I was in the chess club. I loved reading comic books. And you got to get the feel that when you get through that and you start to grow up a little bit, and like you, when you start making a living out of doing the stuff that you love, it's kind of a badge of honor. You're like, yeah, I was a geek. But now there's the geeks, kind of like the trendy geeks. They want to be geeks. I call them the big
in
bang
some ways,
geeks.
the word has kind of waned some because, everybody says, I've got friends who were jocks in high school who used to give me crap for the stuff I liked, who are now claiming to be geeks and nerds on Facebook. They're like, oh man, I just saw the Avengers. I'm such a geek. Like, no, you're not. You liar. You were a total turd to me when I was we were younger or whatever. But I don't know. It's weird because we now live in a time where obviously there were more closet geeks out there. I wasn't alone because the people directing, making, paying for the rich people in Hollywood or in other avenues of entertainment are bringing us content. They're the ones somehow making movies about these comic books that were considered total, childish trash by my parents and others when I was younger. And now suddenly they're these huge blockbuster movies. They're responsible for probably film still being a relevant thing to go see in a theater and not just get stuff at home. I really believe that that modern day hero-based blockbusters are in part, at least, if not predominantly, responsible for the continued success of a movie-going experience in a movie theater. And that idea is crazy. If you went back to my 12-year-old self and said, Scott, put down that ColecoVision football game and look at me for a minute. And I'd put it down and I'd look at this weird old man and I would say, listen, in the future, there will be an Avengers movie, but there'll also be individual Iron Man, Thor, Hulk, Bat. There'll be multiple Batman movies. There'll be all of these things that right now are considered child's play and stupid. This stuff is going to be the most important properties in the history of Hollywood. I don't think I would have believed this crazy old person telling me that because it just seemed impossible then. So, it's amazing what, 25, 30 years will do. And I think it's just because we're all now of age and this stuff matters to us. So people with expendable income and people in professional positions of whatever are starting to be the ones who are calling the shots. And it won't be that long before you have senators, congressmen. You have some already. You just don't hear about them. But people in prominent positions of government and politics who grew up on video games, who played Minecraft when they were kids, who understand what it means to be an avid World of Warcraft player. This seems crazy to people now, but that will be the norm one day, just like comic book readers exist in those positions now. And when they were little kids, that stuff was serious taboo. So to me, it's provided this transition to being kind of an adult geek has provided great perspective on all this stuff for me.
That's actually a brilliant point because when you think about it, when I was growing up, with that box of comics, and of course you always bought two. You had one in the bag that was acid free so you could protect it, and you had one that you would actually read, and which, by the way, my mother threw away when I went into the priesthood. She threw away 4 huge shipping boxes filled with comic books, and I actually kept an inventory. I did it up on a comic book site. That collection would have been worth over $150,000. I mean, it was amazing. But looking at that, when do you think we made the transition? Because when I was growing up and you talked about either a video game or a comic book movie, something that had been adapted into a movie, you talked about Super Mario Brothers, and you're like, oh, well, we're never going to do that again. Or you talked about Spawn, the Spawn movie, which I was so happy to see Spawn because I was a big fan of McFarlane, but then it was crap. It was absolute crap. When did we make the transition?
This is a really good question. I can't believe that I've never actually had this discussion about when it occurred, when this wrinkle in time happened. But speaking of the Spawn movie, I had Todd McFarlane on my show once, and it was a really great opportunity. We got to talk about everything, including the beginnings of Image, and when he and Jim Lee and all those guys left to start that, his time at Marvel and why he left, stuff about that baseball he bid on and won, the McGuire ball. Like all that stuff got to be mentioned, including his love for Spawn and his continued desire that it did well. And I think at the time, he wasn't doing, like, he's more involved now directly in the comic, the actual series, than he was at the time. But it was a really fun conversation. But the minute I asked him about the movie, clammed up, just went, brr. I don't think he is happy with how that thing went at all. It's kind of garbage, that movie. It's not very good at all.
My take on it was there was some executive at the studio who said, well, no, we can't do that. We can't do this. We can't do that. And if you wanted to sell, you have to package it for people who don't read the comic book. And that's what you get.
Pretty much. But as far as like, when did I think it changed? I think that the change happened slowly, and I don't know if there's one seismic moment, but if I had to pick one, maybe two. It might be The Matrix proved that you could because the Matrix is basically a comic book story. It has all the tropes, it has all the framing, it has all the things that you would find in a comic book. Okay, doesn't involve tights and it has people in tights, but it doesn't involve your typical prototypical superhero. There's no Superman archetype or any of that. But there is that quality to it. I think that was a big deal in terms of mainstream acceptance of these concepts. And then I think maybe after that, it was shortly after that you had all the prequels come out. And they're as bad as they were, that still kind of ignited this excitement in these now aging nerds who all grew up with Star Trek or Star Wars and saw Star Wars when they were younger. And now they're super stoked about something new. Garbage or not, that kind of ignited that and got people excited again. So I think that has some responsibility here. I don't know. I feel like maybe the big moment for me when I saw that, oh yeah, we're probably gonna see more and more of this kind of thing, was Pixar's decision to make an entire animated film that was basically about superheroes, which was The Incredibles, which I still think is one of the best movies ever and one of the best superhero movies ever. And some could be confused that that movie was made for kids, but it is absolutely not made for kids. That movie was made for me. And when I saw it, I fell in love with it, and I knew that that would herald in some really creative stuff. So I think somewhere between like 99 and 04 is where you started to see this kind of happen. The guys that were in their 20s like me in the 90s got closer to 30, and people in Hollywood who came up through the system got there, and they had, the wherewithal, the talent or whatever to get things made and make things get done. And I just think there's some culmination of that group getting older and entering that mainstream that changed stuff. But if there's one seismic moment, I don't know what that would have been. I think these things happen over time.
Topaz in our chat room actually had a good suggestion. He said for him, the trifecta is Blade, X-Men, and Spider-Man. So from 98 to 2001, you had three
That's not bad.
blockbuster films that, like you said, you could almost see the turning of the generation where suddenly, no, just make the comic book. Don't try to turn it into something else. Make the comic book.
Yeah,
I think I could go with that.
Unlike the Burton Batman movies, which were really just this weird Burtonification of Batman, it wasn't like the comics, which sucks. And I didn't like him then, and I don't like him now. I like Tim Burton, so this isn't a slam on Tim Burton. I just think that was the wrong move for the comic. That wasn't in the spirit of the comic book then, before that, or now. So it takes a little while for, Christopher Nolan 2005 to do what he does. And think about that. I mean, 2005, we are nearly a decade away from Batman Begins. That's crazy talk. But we are. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot. There's probably some I'm not even thinking of, but you could probably point to a lot of these. And if we're talking about comic book specific stuff, Blade was a big deal, but a lot of people had no idea Blade was a comic book character. They really didn't know. And the Marvel logo was not the cool, big red thing we get now before those movies. It was much more subdued. It was hard R. It was very violent. It was definitely not like a mainstream sort of kid-friendly comic adaptation, nor did it need to be. But my point is, I think that thing was more of a safe bet in a way, because they knew they could go this ultra-violent vampire story and not have to experiment with what it meant to be, a nerdy kid's book. And this is why DC's playing catch up, man. I mean, they're just sitting around going, well, holy crap, look what Marvel's doing. Why aren't we doing that? We should have had Justice League out 4 years ago. So they are in total catch-up mode, not because they just didn't think about it. I'm sure that they did. I just don't think they ever thought it would be successful. Marvel Disney came in and said, well, we don't care. We're going to try it anyway. And they were true to the characters. They're true to the structure of comic books and what it takes to make a big team-up movie. And they nailed it. It's so crazy that they did that. And now DC's like, wait, we've got stuff too. There's a Flash movie, and we're going to do this other one. And now there'll be a Justice League, and Batman and Superman are going to be like fighting for a while. And it's coming off as a little pathetic, but it's because, Warner Brothers, like any other studio, they got a bunch of old guys in there who don't think this stuff's going to sell. And it totally sells, and now they know it, and now they have to play catch up. So I don't know. It's a really weird time we live in, and I just as a kid would never have guessed, because everything I liked was so taboo with adults, and it's just the opposite now. Every adult wants to go see the next Marvel movie. It's just changed completely.
Isn't that weird that they're playing catch up? Because for so much of their history, even characters in the Marvel and DC universes seem to kind of follow each other. And yeah, you did have those team ups, but when you look back at it, Marvel's been working at this for a while. I mean, people do say, wow, they nailed it out the door the first time with the Avengers, and they just blew it out. But they put in the legwork. I mean, it took them a while to build up the Hulk franchise into something that people would actually watch. They did Captain America, they did Thor, of course they did Iron Man, and so they had that natural buy-in for the Avengers movie. DC, it does, like, do you agree? It feels rushed. I mean, I understand they want the Justice League because they need something that's going to combat the Avengers, but there's part of me that says, guys, you got to wait. You got to build up your characters.
You're exactly right. They have to pay their freaking dues is what they have to do, and they haven't done it yet. They've done it with Batman, but that time is over. We're on to a new controlling group director and everybody else over Batman. So their time with Nolan is come and gone. He did amazing work. Everyone loves the Batman series, especially the middle bit. And the bigger issue to me is what must really rub them wrong is here is a company, and here's DC and here's Warner Brothers, who own the two most iconic hero archetypes of all time. I would argue Batman is the greatest superhero of all time. I think Batman is the man. Okay, he's the dude. Superman, at the very least, whether you like Superman or not, or think it's aged well or not, it's still the most iconic character in the history of comic books. Switch over to Marvel, where they have signed off their X-Men movie, their Spider-Man license, Punisher, can't remember what else, Fantastic Four. These are all now controlled by other companies other than Marvel because they sold that stuff off back when they were desperate. So with Fox and Sony and those guys making those movies, they have to figure out, well, what are we going to do? What do we have left in our stable? I'm telling you, man, Iron Man used to be the most B-level character. He just was. Anybody who read the comics knows this. This isn't a surprise. He was B-level, low tier, okay? They were all below X-Men. They were all below Spider-Man, but they don't have the rights to that stuff. So what do they have to do? They have to figure out a way to make these B characters amazing. And they totally pulled it off. So they've built a bunch of franchises and one big combined franchise that makes a whole new generation think that the Avengers are the coolest thing ever, and that Iron Man was always the best and always awesome, and that Thor was always cool. In other words, they flipped the entire thing. And that's not even with their top tier stuff. If they ever get the rights back to Spider-Man or X-Men, everybody else should just step down and go, that's it, we give up. Because they'll do amazing things with their own properties again one day. But those were their top tier. Now they don't feel that way anymore. The new Spider-Man's, the new X-Men, it's all right. But it ain't the same as this B-level crap that went from 0 to 60 in like 4 years. It's so crazy to me. And that must rub DC wrong 10 different ways to Sunday, I'll bet.
Yeah, if go into that time machine, or take that old man coming up to you and saying, 10 years ago, oh, by the way, yeah, I know it looks really bad for Marvel right now, but 10 years from now, they're going to rule the roost, and DC won't know how to make a movie out of any of their characters. You'd go, are you kidding me? DC still has it all. DC, they can turn it on at a switch. What does Marvel have? I mean, can you imagine that same man telling you, by the way, two of the main characters they're going to build this blockbuster Avengers franchise over will be Hawkeye and Black Widow. You'd just be going, wait, I'm sorry, what?
You wouldn't have believed it. You wouldn't have believed it. And even, it's like, what it'd be like? It'd be like hanging out with Steve Jobs in 95 or 96, 94, I guess, 95, and saying, yeah, next year you're going to be asked to go back and take Apple over, and you're going to turn it into a near-death bankruptcy company to one of the most cash-filled juggernauts of all corporate history in the span of about 10 years. That's going to happen to you there, Steve Jobs. He may have actually believed it. But the point is, it's the same kind of thing. Nobody believed they were going to make it out. Nobody believed Marvel in the early 90s was going to do anything. I mean, they were just hawking stuff off to save themselves. Comics were kind of all over the place. They were taking a bad whipping over the whole image thing and that whole migration of all their top talent leaving. I mean, it was bad. It was grim. And all it takes is, get Disney involved in some real money, and they've suddenly gone crazy with it. And they're about to do it with Star Wars too. So I'm telling you, man, the humble beginnings of Mickey Mouse artist Walt Disney that will be the legacy in entertainment. Give us another 20 years and people look back and go, my gosh, look how big this thing freaking is. Actually, because that $4 billion they paid for Star Wars, dividend. That's nothing.
Nope.
Nothing.
Nope.
I can't believe they got that deal. Let me put it that way. I cannot believe that was that cheap. That was like you and I going to a garage sale and finding some priceless Chinese ancient heirloom, and the people there just thought it was a piece of crap jewelry or something, and walking away with that thing for like $2. That's what they did. I cannot believe they bought it for so cheap. It's amazing to me.
Yeah, when we heard about that sale, I was thinking, I misread it. I thought, oh, they bought a part of it for $4 billion. And then I'm like, oh my God, they bought the whole thing, including merchandising rights. Are you out of your mind?
Oh no, they're going to make, it's just the amount of money they're going to make is going to be ungodly. That's just, by the end of all that, all the money in the world will be gone. They'll have it all.
I got to give you a chat room question. Mr. Mike wants to know if you think they're going to do the Fantastic Four reboot correctly.
Probably be, well, I think it's going to be a lot better than the other two. Certainly a billion times better than the weird Roger Corman. Is it Roger Corman? Not Roger. Anyway, the Corman thing that was in the 90s, the 94 one, which is hideous. I don't think that ever made it to theaters. Anyway, it'll be better than those. Will it be as good as it could be? I have my doubts. I don't know that Fox is all that good of a steward of these licenses any more than Sony has been. I would much rather Marvel own it. Like, Marvel just got the rights back to Ghost Rider and Punisher and Blade. I don't know how quick they'd make a Blade movie again, but I think I'm much happier with those properties being in their hands, and I'd feel the same way about Fantastic Four. But I guarantee you this will be better than that, than those old ones. This will be a nice step up, and I'll see it regardless. And you know what? I'm not complaining. I mean, here we are in a world where Marvel competes with itself in a weird way. Like, it's just unbelievable to me. So probably say bring it on. It comes out next year, I think. So I'm in.
I'm having flashbacks to that the Dredd, the original Dredd movie, where all restaurants are Taco Bell. I'm wondering if we get to a point where if Marvel really nails down their act, other studios go, it's just not profitable to make any other kind of movie anymore.
Was that Judge Dredd, or are you thinking of you're thinking of Demolition Man?
I'm Demolition Man. I'm sorry.
It's all right. They both had
it was the same characters. It was Stallone and what's his name? Paper guy. Was
Rob Schneider?
Rob Schneider. They're both of them. Both of them.
Oh, that's funny. That's a hoot.
My bad.
Yeah, I like Dredd. That's another funny example. That's a European comic, a UK comic, and it's amazing. It's got an incredible long life, and some of that old stuff in the 80s and 90s was amazing. The fact that they actually made a movie that was consistent with the tone of those books is still pretty incredible to me as well. I think it's just we live in a time where people are not afraid of the risk anymore. It no longer seems like a totally out there prospect to make a book or make a movie based on these books and be true to the books at the same time, and not try to create some kind of weird flat line for the most possible audience acceptance. They're comfortable that we are all cool with the tropes of comic books and the ideas contained therein, and they don't have to whitewash it for us.
Now, I could talk to you about comics and movies forever, but I do want to talk a little bit about Frog Pants, because you've built something a little magical over there. Can you tell us a little bit about Frog Pants, how it came about, and what you're trying to do with it?
Well, the name, I'll tell you about the name real quick. It's a short story. My wife and I were talking years and years and years ago. It's been maybe early 2000s, about opening a children's bookstore. And we were going to call it Frog Pants because it seemed kind of whimsical and kid-friendly or whatever. And we changed our minds because that seemed like a giant business that would be really hard to manage. So that thing, which was really just a domain I owned, sat and languished in my domain list for years and years and years. And then we got about 2008 or so, and I decided I better get this thing incorporated and registered with the state and everything. And with that name was still available, I thought, well, that's kind of weird, so we'll just use that. So that's where the name came from. But all this other stuff started kind of with the comics at first, because, I mean, basically, I'd spent high school and college submitting comic strips to newspapers, magazines, and the like. Everything from local newspapers to national syndicates to Psychology Today, just whatever I could send a comic to see if I could get it published. And you learn very quickly that whole rigmarole And even the most successful comic strip artists ever have gone through this, and sometimes very painfully before they ever got accepted. But you realize that it was like this giant gate, right? And the only way to get in that gate was to either know somebody on the other side or get real lucky. And thousands of people are at the gate trying to get in, and one guy holds the key. It's the same with what we're doing tonight. There used to be that if you and I wanted to do something via video, broadcast it out for a bunch of people to see it, the only way to do that was to go through a tiny little gate, and very few people controlled the gate, and that was television or radio, with all of its rigmarole of control and editing and censorship and management or whatever. And when the web hit about 98, 99 or so, it became clear to me that you could do a lot with your own work online. And I made a decision. I was working as a designer for a company at the time, and I made a decision that I would start a web comic, mainly just as an excuse to be drawing all the time. Here we are. 2 days ago, it was my 13th year doing that comic strip, and I still do it every week, and that's over at myextralife.com. But that's kind of how things got started with me. It was like, wait a minute, I don't need a manager. I don't have this gateway to get through anymore. Nobody can tell me what to do or not to do. It's all up to me. If I want to build an audience, it's all down to me pulling up my sleeves and figuring it out. The writing was on the wall and made perfect sense to me. And so that, combined with my sort of love of radio, I mean, these are really the only two things I've ever cared about, talk radio and drawing. And when I was a little kid, that's all I cared about. I ran around with a pencil and a tape recorder, and those were my two vices when I was a kid. So basically, I'm just doing what I did when I was a kid. Nothing's really changed, but I've just figured out how to monetize it. But the problem, not the problem, but the way things started evolving with rich media on the internet, be it audio or video or whatever, that started to kick in the early aughts. And around 2002, 2003, I started doing little shows, putting them up as MP3s. MP3s were still kind of a new thing. It was a new format. Got my feet wet there. And as time went on, the comic continued to thrive. I started to build a fan base. Podcasting rolls around 94. I totally jump onto that. The rest is kind of history. I just haven't stopped. So I basically just figured out, like a lot of us have, a way to cheat the system. There's no longer these gatekeepers, and anybody can do it. And if you've got the talent, the desire, the wherewithal to stick it out and do it, you can make it as an independent dude in this business. And that's really where it's at. That's all. I've essentially accomplished that big goal when I was a kid that I never thought was possible, especially as I got older. I'm just like, I'm not going to get in here. It's just too much. There can only be one Bill Watterson. There can't be 50 of them. But I knew once I saw the internet begin to evolve in the way it did, I just knew this was going to be the way. And so here we are.
Now, there are people in the chat who are wondering about that first spark of inspiration where you realized, I could do this for a living. I mean, the internet is great for that because, it means that you can own everything from start to finish. Yeah. You have complete creative control. But there must have been a moment at some point when you were growing up where you said, no, this is what I'm going to do. I believe I've got the talent to draw. I've got a quirky sense of humor. People are going to like this. All I have to do is get it out to them. How does that work?
I think there was a time, I don't know. When I was young, I thought I was pretty good. I look at that stuff now and it's terrible. It's just awful. I don't even like looking at things that are like 3 years old. I look back on some of my older art or older work and just go, ugh, can't stand looking at it. So, but I always knew there was something there, and it was never like, oh, I could make a career out of this, because I didn't know how I'd do it. And I didn't know, I never knew if it was going to work out. I really didn't. And in fact, the only regret I have is not starting the actual business side of this sooner. I didn't actually jump out full time doing this until 2009, early 09, which now is a few years ago, but at the time, it seems like yesterday to me. And I wish I would have done it sooner, because all the fears you have about, I got a house payment and kids and they're in school and there's 2 cars and how are we going to pay for that? And I can't do this weird, risky thing. And it turns out it wasn't all that risky, because I'd already kind of built up the momentum I needed. I had the fan base that I needed. They're already there supporting me. They're buying things on the store. I had good advertisers with good relationships for the shows and things. And so it was all there. I just had to nut up and go. And I finally did. And that was a big deal to finally do that. Get off my butt and make it happen.
That might be our show title, Nut Up and Go. But
Nut up and go, man.
I like that. All right, so Frog Pants. That's Frog Pants basically came out of this crazy idea that you could make a living out of this, and you could go directly to the people who are actually consuming it. You didn't have to go to a publisher.
Correct.
You didn't have to sell it to someone who would then distribute it. That's fascinating. But then there's something else. There's this thing that people have heard about called Nerdtacular. Can you explain to us what Nerdtacular is?
Yeah, all right. So circa 2007, I decided I wanted to do something fun with local fans. So I was just like thinking, hey, people in the Valley, in the state, I thought, you know what, let's rent out a movie theater and let's all meet there and let's watch Spider-Man 3 of all things. It sucked, but whatever. We went. That's what we did. Rented an entire theater on a Saturday. Everybody showed up, watched a movie, gave out prizes, hung out, did T-shirts. Just had a lot of fun. Okay, not a giant deal, but it was fun, and it really took off. People are like, whoa, this is great. We want to do this every year. I'm like, yeah, I think I might do this every year. So the next year, did the same thing, rented the whole place out, had another big movie. Again, it was all about movies and just hanging out with nerds. That year, we had like 8. The first year, we had a guy from France come all the way here for this one day, all right, which is crazy. Next year, we had 9 people from out of the state come in, and the country, state and country. Third year, which would have been Star Trek, we had 45 people from out of the state of the country show up, and we were up to like 600 people. It was maximum, biggest theater we could get. We sold out. And then 2010 was the last year we did a theater. But that last year, we had 145 of the 600 people were from out of the state or out of the country. And I just started to realize, oh, this is different. This is bigger and weirder than I thought it was going to be. Like, this is a lot of people from lots of places. Tom Merritt came that year. Veronica Belmont would come the next year. The year after that, so the year after 2010, 2011, we did a full panel thing for a full day thing where the fans could come and listen to people. We upped the number of tickets. Veronica Belmont, Tom Merritt, Patrick from France, other co-hosts of mine. Like, we just had everybody there. And no movie this time, just straight up full day of panels, conversations, prizes, just a big hangout, food, whatever. That really went well. We're like, okay, we're going to keep doing this. Did the same thing the next year. That grew. We outgrew the place we were renting. So in 2013, which is last year, we rented an entire, it's normally a winter resort where people go skiing, but in the summer, it's freaking gorgeous up there, called Snowbird. And it's this big lodge hotel and just real nice, like luxury kind of getaway mountain retreat kind of thing that isn't really all that far. Yeah, not Patrick Erzberms. You're right. That's the Patrick I'm referring to. He's on Twit stuff all the time. Anyway, we rented that whole place out and did a much bigger deal. Schwood came out and did his magic act. Justin Robert Young came out this time. All the regular people that usually come. We had a bunch of guest people there that are kind of big shots in my community, and it just kept growing. And so this year we're doing it again. In fact, it's in 2 weeks. And we're going to go up there, take over the place again, and just have a good time. But it's basically just a big celebration of the community. It's not really to make money. I don't really make money at it. It's more of a, let's cover our costs and get everybody in one place and kind of extend the network a little bit and make a more personal connection with some of the fans. And, people bring their kids, and it's just great. We love it. It's a good time. You should come one year.
I would love to. And actually, I was planning on coming this year, and then I had to cover some stuff at Twit. Because
I'm going to blame Leo. Next time I see Leo, I'm blaming him.
I was booking it, and then I got an email saying we need you to work that weekend. I'm like,
that's too bad.
I understand.
We'll get you in 2015, man. No worries.
There we go. No, but it reminds me a little bit of what we were talking about earlier, where it's kind of a celebration of all the people who were nerds and geeks before nerds and geeks were popular. It's a celebration of the people who. They actually know this stuff. They see someone dressing up and they go, oh, I know who that's supposed to be. Not, are you an Avenger? Are you the Hulk? I kind of like that. I love that camaraderie that goes beyond the surface. When someone's not just talking about a movie, but they could actually tell you who the Guardians of the Galaxy were before the big trailer for the Guardians of the Galaxy. To me, that's special.
That's a super nerd is what that is. I mean, the nice thing about Nerdtacular is it's more of a channel. The name doesn't really imply it's not just all nerds, like the stereotypic nerds. I mean, maybe some of us are. I probably am. But yeah, the core part of that conversation for having all those people there is to say, look, this new media stuff we're involved in, it's not the same as, let's say, a TV show you're really into and the actors on it being on stage at Comic-Con or something. This is a chance for us to actually mingle, hang out, hear your story, find out why these things are meaningful to you. Because it turns out to some people, very meaningful. I mean, the kinds of emails I get blow my mind how personal people feel about the content and how much it's affected their lives in various ways. So this is really a chance for us to break that wall and not have this separation between internet fame people and regular folk. I want to be able to shake hands and hug them and hear their story and find out why they care. And this is that opportunity. So we keep it low key. We only sell so many tickets. We're not trying to make another Comic-Con someplace. We're trying to make something that's just sort of special for those who want to attend this thing. And that's what it is. And we always talk about, we're going to expand, we're going to make bigger or whatever. It may grow in some ways, but my goal is to keep it personal. Tickets are super cheap. They're only $45 for 3 days. We're not trying to turn this into a second business or third business. The goal here is just create those connections, establish that bond, and give back to the community. Because honestly, that's the big difference now is community is everything. It's not like it was back in the old days. The audience is not just a bunch of paying masses. They're people with personalities and lives, and it's a different kind of relationship than I think people in traditional media have with their audiences, and I'm just fine with that.
Scott, would you mind if we took some time just to talk about a few geeky stories when we come back? Does that sound good to you?
Of course, absolutely.
All right, but before we do that, I thought we might want to bring back a little something from Twit of old. Have any of you ever wondered how to F a dog?
What did you just do?
I can make weird noises.
Dude, can you do an impression of like dubstep for us? F a dog!
In my mind,
terrifying.
one of the most brilliant things ever to come out of NSFW. It was absolutely fantastic.
Oh, man.
I
forgot all about that.
How could you forget it? It was brilliant.
I forgot it existed because I'm not used to seeing myself as such a dope. Also, that was 45 pounds heavier back then, so I look so weird.
So now you can go back and see what it looks like.
Yeah, weird. Ugh. Freaky.
Now, you know what?
Nicely done, though.
You know what's not freaky?
What's that?
Space. You heard about space,
Yeah,
right?
space is all right. I like space.
You big into space?
Yeah, I think it's a place we should explore.
You heard about these dragon guys?
Put more stuff.
Yeah,
Dragon guys. What? There's dragons in space? What are you telling me?
Yeah, it's like Game of Thrones up in space, except with Elon Musk. So a few weeks ago, they revealed their new Dragon spacecraft, and I have to say, this is the first picture that I saw of it, and I the first thing that flashed to my mind was they've got Recaro seats on a spacecraft. I mean, look at that thing.
Awesome.
It's that's some workmanship.
Yeah.
Seriously, that's work. But the tech specs behind this thing are actually amazing. I mean, they're really, really impressive. This spacecraft can transport 7,300 pounds of cargo. That's the original Dragon. But this Dragon 2 transports not just cargo, but it also transports a crew of 7, or a combination of crew and cargo. Now, the thing about the original Dragon is that it was fine for cargo on short trips, but it couldn't really do a pressurized cabin that could keep, people alive. And we like to keep people alive. So what they've done with this one is, again, they've made it possible to maintain a live crew for 7 days. But more than that, they've created it so that it can stay berthed with the International Space Station for 180 to 210 days. That's important because that's the same longevity as the Russian Soyuz capsule, which means that this thing could dock with the ISS and stay there as a lifeboat, especially considering what's going on in the world right now. I think it might be a good idea to have something that could, perhaps replace international cooperation. Did you see this thing at all when they released it? Did you watch their?
I saw the all I've seen is the photo of that cockpit before.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. It looks super sci-fi, and it's one of the things I like about their whole program is that they seem to be so inspired by science fiction and not just limited by it. Like in a way, it's nice to see them taking inspiration from this kind of stuff for the actual end result. I feel like some of the best products we have today, best technological advances we have today, are often, you could easily confuse it with something from an episode of some science fiction show or from 2001: Space Odyssey or whatever. And when that happens, I feel like it's discounted, but I feel like it's good for humans to pull from imagination and then apply physics and construction and all the stuff you're going to need to make the damn thing work. Getting there, I think, having that imagination part in there is a huge deal. So they always seem to work that way, and this looks like no different to me. Looks awesome.
Yeah, one of the amazing things is that this craft is designed to land vertically. So I mean, this is what we saw from sci-fi, right? This is what we expected out of spacecraft, that somehow they would land on plumes of fire and they would soft land, and you wouldn't have to do like a bouncing thing. You wouldn't have to worry about landing a brick. It actually does re-entry and then lands like a spacecraft of old. It's got these nacelles on the side. They actually call them nacelles, with 4 engines each. And the cool thing is they've really thought this through. If one of the engines quits, it can still go on. If 2 engines quit, it's got a backup parachute system so that it can land like a traditional spacecraft. But otherwise, it does this thing, this vertical landing that it's amazing to think that this came out of a non-governmental agency. We haven't seen this thing actually fly yet, but it amazes me. I think this is another one of those things where if old me were to come back as a child and find me as a child and say, oh, and by the way, that space shuttle that you're so jazzed about, in 30 years, there's going to be a private company that's going to come up with a better technology. And I'd say, you're crazy. That's not possible.
Yeah. Or they're going to retire they're going to shuttle the shuttle program, which sounds crazy. Even today, that sounds crazy. But yeah, oftentimes the best innovations come with people with amazing ideas and a bunch of money. So it's not too surprising. What's good is that we're starting to see that next generation of people who made it huge with internet stuff and are now going, all right, well, that's not all I'm good for on this planet. I've got these other ideas, and then seeing them put their money where their mouth is very inspiring for me. I think these guys are just the tip of that arrow. There's going to be a lot more. It's going to get competitive. I think that's good. And who knows? By the time I'm 80, maybe my kids or their kids will, actually have the opportunity to get in some sort of ship, go tour the outer edges of the moon, and come home again. That would be amazing.
I remember having a discussion with a couple of geeks in an airport, and one of them was saying, well, this internet generation, all they do is build apps, and who cares about apps? And then I think of people like Elon Musk, or I even think of people like Bill Gates, who enabled a lot of this, who took that fortune, as you said, and now they're actually doing something else with it that has nothing to do with what they did before. And I think you're right. I think we're on the cusp of a generation where these brilliant men who now have money behind them, and women, by the way, will be able to make a difference in the world.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, all right. Now, let's move on from sci-fi becoming reality and talk a little bit about something that I think maybe might be a bit more in your bailiwick. I'm glad we have you on to talk about this. And that's, you mentioned him before, Bill Watterson, right?
Yeah.
Now, anybody who grew up in the 80s or 90s knows Bill Watterson. How do you know Bill Watterson? You know Bill Watterson because of Calvin and Hobbes. Now, that's that strip that ran for many years between 1985 and 1995. And the strip chronicled the adventures of Calvin, who was a 6-year-old boy, and Hobbes, who was his anthropomorphic stuffed animal tiger. He named the titular character after John Calvin, who was a theologian in the 16th century French Revolution, and Thomas Hobbes, who 100 years later was an English political philosopher. Now, at its height, Calvin and Hobbes sold, I believe, was it 45 million copies of the 18 books that he created. It was located in, it was found in more than 2,400 newspapers around the world. I think it was in something like 32 different languages. So obviously some popularity here. Were you inspired by Calvin and Hobbes at all?
Oh yeah, you can't help not be. I mean, if you are creating comics today, if you're drawing comic strips or you're creating characters, or even if you're working in full-blown comic books where things are a little bit more realistic than, say, a Calvin and Hobbes strip, if you claim that you are not at least a little bit inspired by Calvin and Hobbes and by Watterson's work, you're lying. Because there's no way. There's no way. It was too impactful, too seismic for the industry, too mainstream, but also too subversive for you to ignore. I mean, it was special. There was something going on there, and still is. I mean, I missed that comic horribly. There was, something special there. I shouldn't say I miss it. I've got the whole collection over in the other room in giant book form, so I can read them anytime I want. But yeah, it's amazing stuff. And the fact that he's kind of poked the setup a little bit here recently is awesome. It's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things about Calvin and Hobbes is that it kind of transcended generations for a while there. Even after it went out of circulation, it still maintained mainstream popularity, which is strange for a comic strip, outside of maybe like Family Circus. But the other thing about Calvin and Hobbes was how it ended. It was popular. It was still very, very popular. Bill Watterson could have kept doing it for years, and he could have kept doing it till now. But the story started coming out that he was kind of a recluse. He was a little eccentric. Kind of wanted to be left alone. In fact, it's been really difficult for people to get a hold of him. There was a story a while back how George Lucas contacted Watterson about working with him on a couple of projects, and Lucas couldn't even get a call back. So that tells you how much this man valued his privacy. Did you ever try to contact Watterson?
No. I remember. I'm trying to remember if we did this for real in 85, 86. A friend of mine and I think we may have tried to send him a letter. But I don't remember it going.
And we will probably have to put an edit point there. Unfortunately, it seems as if we've lost Scott Johnson to some internet issues. You can call Comcast and thank them for their fantastic service. Now, before we go, I thought it might be time, maybe, for us to get into the tech. A few weeks ago, I was at Maker Faire 2014 down in San Mateo, and I had a chance to talk to a few lads from a company that was trying to make us conductive ink. I'm Father Robert Ballister, the digital Jesuit for Twit TV, here at Maker Faire 2014. Do you remember when you were a kid? You received a brand new toy, and even though the toy was fascinating, the thing that most drew your attention was the giant cardboard box it came in. Well, we're here at Giant Cardboard Robot, and they're trying to remind you of the passion you had for this most flexible of maker materials. Now, it may seem a little silly to make things like giant robot arms out of cardboard, but you got to remember, when we're talking about the maker generation, we're talking about introducing kids to designing and to building something from their imagination at a young age. And what better material than cardboard?
Now, there's a couple of problems with just getting the car to where we could start to film with it, because it was in a container in which we backed it up and pulled the emergency brake. But now the emergency brake was underneath this pig, which was no longer a pig. It was more like a pig-shaped mound of hairy, bony pudding that smelled worse than anything you've ever smelled in your life. And I know that there are people you've smelled, if you've actually ever smelled a truly dead and rotting thing, you never forget it. And you can smell the tiniest hint of it on the wind. It'd be something like, something died over there. So Jamie had to get in the car and sit on the pig. Or rather, in the pig. and reached sort of through it to release the emergency brake. Now, he had a gas mask, but it didn't have air being pumped into it, which was a problem because there was no air in the Corvette. It was all ammonia. So he started choking and he had to open all the windows, reach across it was the most, I mean, I've never seen Jamie so unhappy. And I've seen Jamie pretty unhappy. I also tried to eat ribs that day for lunch, which might be the stupidest thing I've ever done.
If you've done any sort of electronic design, you know what a pain in the butt it is to bake your own PCB. It normally involves some drilling, a copper clad board, a lot of chemicals, and a lot of time. Well, what if I told you that you could get your own quick prototype simply by drawing it? I'm here at the AGIC booth with Shinya Shimizu, who's going to explain to us what their technology can do. What is all of this?
This is conductive silver ink, with which you can just draw circuits. You're not, asking PCB manufacturers to manufacture the PCB.
The nice thing about this is it's really for fast prototyping. So if you've got an idea, you want to get it on paper, you can actually draw out the circuits to make sure that it's going to work. And it's essentially the same as printing a circuit board, only you're looking at a turnaround time of seconds rather than hours or days. Now tell me, it's not just this, right? Because no one drew this. What's this that you're holding?
This is conductive inkjet circuit printer. So here's actual printer here, so with which you can just print electronic circuit with normal inkjet printer with our special conductive ink.
If I were to ask you who you're pitching this for, who do you want to buy this product? Who do you think should buy your product? Who would you tell the audience is the target for silver conductive ink?
Anyone who want to enter the maker space, I would say. Because, because of the 3D printer, now you can make any plastic very easily, but electric circuits is still very difficult part and time-consuming part. But with a printer, you can print electronic circuit board immediately in 2-3 minutes.
Now, Shinya, here's the big question. Price, availability, and where do they go to find out more about AGIC?
All right, so we just finished Kickstarter project, so we're not selling right now, but printer, the ready-to-use printer is gonna be available for $600. And the cost per print is just $2 or $3, which is quite cheap. Yeah. And the pen is available for $15, $12 here, and $15 includes a paper and some kits, which is available at Maker Faire.
Well, Shinya, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Thank you for this, because, this is going to inspire a new generation of IC makers. I'm Father Robert Ballas, and go draw yourself a circuit. I want to thank everyone who helped put together that footage from Maker Faire. That was actually a lot of fun. For anyone who's ever thought about doing stuff, creating stuff, imagining stuff, it's a great event to go to, and I'd say it's almost as good as Nerdtacular. Unfortunately, we never were able to really recomplete the connection with Scott Johnson, so I'll have to speak for him. If you want to know what's going on with My Extra Life, if you want to know what's going on at the Frog Pants Network, be sure to find him at frogpants.com or go to check out Nerdtacular at nerdtacular.com. It's a fantastic event. It's something that's definitely worth doing. Maybe a little bit late for this year, but look at possibly attending and celebrating your geekitude next year. As for me, you can find me here on the Twit TV network pretty much all the time. On Mondays, you'll find me on This Week Enterprise Tech at 2:30 p.m. Pacific time. We talk about data centers, about switches, about networking, and pretty much anything that makes the internet go. On Thursdays at 11 o'clock, you'll find me for Know How, along with Cranky Hippo Brian, who, we're going to show you some of the geeky projects that we are working on, including in the next couple of weeks, where we're going to be playing with some remote control cars, remote control vehicles, and maybe rekindling some of your childhood memories of building model kits. At 1 o'clock, you're going to find me with Shannon Morse for Coding 101, where we're going to teach you the beginning information you need to enter the wonderful world of the Code Monkey. And, of course, you're going to find me here Fridays, 7 o'clock p.m. Pacific time for Padre's Corner. I'm Father Robert Ballas, and congratulations, you made it out sane on the other side. This has been Padre's Corner.